Okay, so we're going to set our needle guards. Before you tighten your loopers, you have to get at that needle guard screw. Before you tighten your loopers, we have to get it and tighten these needle guard screws, okay? Basically, when the needles are all the way down, you want to set your needle guard as close as possible to the needle without pushing it in any. So right up against it, but without pushing it in. So maybe you want to set it 0.1 millimeter distance, something like that, or touching of 0.1 millimeter. So you have to drop your loopers to tighten the screws. You're going to have to just estimate. We're going to snug them up. I'm just going to guess what would be closest. I'm going to make them snug. I'm not tightening all the way because we're going to have to go back, check it, and get them in the right location by tapping on them, which you'll see. All right. So I snug up all 4 needle guards. Now make sure you straighten your loopers out, because like I said earlier, every time you come down with these needles, you want to make sure you're not hitting the top of your looper. Okay, so now I'm going to bring the needles back down all the way. And we're going to, here we go. Okay, and if you see right here, take a quick look. Look, this one is too far away. This one is touching. I'm not sure if it's too much yet. We'll take a look at it. This one is touching already, and that one is touching already. So we've got 3 touching already. One's a little far away. So the one that's far away, all you have to do is take a short screwdriver and your hammer, tap it a little closer. That's really close. It's close. It's not touching, but it could be away a little bit. It could be about, like I said, 0.1, 0.2 millimeters is fine. This one was touching. We're going to come off a little. Still touching. Still touching. Okay. Now we got that 0.1, 0.2. That's good. Come over to this one. Alright, that one looks like it moved too far. We'll come back and get that. Okay. Okay. Now you have to drop them again. Now you have to drop your loopers again and tighten them up. We still might have to adjust them a little, but now I'm going to tighten them. Alright. Alright. Move the looper out of your way. Tighten. Looper out of your way. Tighten. Come back and straighten these loopers out. Looper rocker back up. Make sure they're straight so we don't hit. Come back down, and we're going to check these guards one more time. That's good. That's good. That's good. That one's a little too far. We could just come. Now the screw's a little tighter. We might have to hit it a little hard. Up. A little too much. Okay, good. And now all the needle guards are set. That's all there is to the needle guards. Needles all the way down. Loop needle guard should be about 0.1 to 0.2 millimeters. If you're sewing a little heavier, you might have to be right up against that needle. But 0.1 for most operations, 0.1, 0.2 millimeters is fine. Okay, next. Now we're going to set our looper. How close do you want the looper to your needle? On the scarf side, again, loopers coming in, needles going up. You're in the center of the scarf. You want to be as close as possible without deflecting the needle. So when you reach the scarf, you want to be in there tight, as close as possible without deflecting the needle. So I'm bringing my needle into the middle of the scarf. My looper into the middle of the needle scarf. Bring your looper in. Okay, and I'm just going to touch it right up against that needle. Go to my next looper. Touch it right up against that needle. Next looper. right up against the needle. Now when you tighten them, they might move in on you a little. They might move away a little when you tighten them. So you'll have to hold it in place with your finger. That's why my finger's on top of it. You would be able to feel if it was moving in on you or moving away on you. Right now they all seem to be cooperating. Okay. Now we have to check. Again, you'll need your magnifying glass. You'll have to check. I'm going to look at it real close and make sure that it's not deflecting on the scarf side. Now on your downstroke, it will deflect a little bit. So on your way down, in the eye-to-eye position, you will deflect a little bit. The needle will deflect a little bit off the looper. That is normal. So on your downstroke, you do want to deflect. On your way up, when you first get to the scarf, that's when you don't want any deflection. You want to be as close as possible with no deflection. On your way in. On your way down again, in the eye-to-eye position, you will deflect a little bit. That's the correct setting. So I'm going to look at it close with my magnifying glass now. Make sure we're not deflecting on the way in. Make sure we're close enough to the scarf. Looks good. Now I'm going to check on the downstroke, the eye-to-eye position. Make sure we're not deflecting too much. You want to deflect a little bit, but you don't want to deflect too much. If you were deflecting too much, you would see when the looper comes off the needle on your backstroke where it's at the top of the scarf. If it was deflecting too much, it would also, you would see it, the needle moving as the looper leaves the needle. As the looper leaves the needle on the way back, if it was too close, you would also see the needle moving a little bit there. You don't want it moving there. You want it moving in the eye-to-eye position. You're deflecting in the eye-to-eye position. But when you come off the scarf, when you're at the top of the scarf, when the looper leaves the needle completely, you don't want any deflection. Okay, looks pretty good to me. Okay, at this point, we've done the looper and needle timing. We have to do the spreaders next. But at this point, we're finished with the looper and needle timing. We're going to make sure everything's tight. Okay, make sure your needle bar is tight. Okay, I'm going to come back, make sure our looper distance bolt is tight, which I'm sure we did already. Okay, I'm also going to come back, make sure my looper holder screws are tight. That one. Those should have been tightened. Okay, and now everything is tight. Okay, looper screw is tight, needle guard screw is tight. Okay, at this point, we're ready to install our spreaders. The spreaders are a little complicated. These are the most complicated. This is the most complicated part of the timing because there's actually 4 different settings you have to look at. Okay, here is the spreader timing. We're going to have to be a ½ millimeter from the needle. That's when the needle's all the way down. We'll show you in a second, but we're going to have a ½ millimeter here. When it comes on top of the looper, you only want 0.1 millimeter, as close as possible to the looper without hitting it when it comes over. When the spreader comes over the top of the looper, I should get a looper. We'll get a looper in a second. 0.1. Then this will be our right to left position of the whole shaft. You can move the shaft. Shaft gets moved right to left. This is where you come over the top of the looper. Okay, and then and you also have to make sure that it's not twisted. The angle of the spreader. Can't be turned that way. Can't be turned that way. It's got to be nice and level and flat. Okay, so first thing we do is we put our spreader shaft in. This is our spreader shaft. Now make sure you're putting it in the right way. It has to come all the way. It has to come all the way into here to be held by these 2 screws, all the way into the spreader drive arm here. You can put it in backwards. You can put the spreader bar in backwards. So make sure you're putting it in the right way. Okay, this way would be way off. Now you can see it. This is the 1/4" quarter spreader bar. This way would not line up. This way will. So we slide it in this way. Very good. Okay, at this point, you can put all 4 spreaders in. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. We could also put all 4 screws in. So, small 1.5 millimeter Allen screw. And we could snug up the bar for now so it don't move on us. And while we're putting in these screws, I'll just tighten 1. 2. 3. And 4. Okay, at this point we have all our spreaders in and our screws in. Right now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, honestly all it is an estimate. I'm going to estimate, I'm going to guess. I'm going to guesstimate where they should be. I know I can get close enough. Okay, by how far the spreader here sticks out. Okay, it's not going to be exact, but I'm going to get them all about where I think they should be. So I loosen it, put it to about where I think they should be. I really don't have an exact measurement on this. We probably should. It would be a good idea to have a measurement from here to here, but we don't. But this is a good way to get started, to just guesstimate a position for your spreader. Okay, at this point, we're going to rock the spreaders over. Okay, at this point I can see, if you look on this side here, the spreader is way above the looper. Way too high. If you go back to this picture, okay, it's only supposed to be 0.1. So at this point it's way too high. So I'm gonna just tap on them a little. Remember I have this shaft snug, just a little bit, 1 screw only holding. So now I come down. Okay, we're getting closer, we're getting closer. Before I get too close though, I'm going to want to check this position now. This is the 0.5 millimeter position. Okay, when your spreaders are parallel with your needles. Spreaders and needles are parallel. That's a 0.5 millimeter distance. 0.5 millimeter distance. What we use is one of these rulers. Most everybody has one of these rulers. Most every mechanic has one. Kansai ruler. These are a 0.5 millimeter. Okay, and this is what we use to set our spreader distance, our 0.5 millimeter distance. You see our spreaders are parallel. They're right in front of the needles, parallel with them. And we want to slide this right in between, and it should fit. Not too snug though. This one right now is a little too snug. This one here is probably perfect. So this one here is perfect. That's the distance you want. The middle one's too snug. So I would come back in here. Now you don't want your shaft to move too much. So now I'll come back and tighten bolt screws. Okay. Now when you adjust the spreaders, you see my finger is on the bottom. You got to work your finger in from underneath, because when you tighten these, they're going to twist around a little bit on you anyway. So get your finger underneath it, and that's how you move. I'm going to back this one up just a little bit, and I'm going to tighten it up again. Okay, and that's much better now. Now you always work from the inside out. So even though, see, this one's loose now, that's okay. We're going to come back and get that one, because if it's too tight, it will affect how this feels on your inside needle. So you always work from your inside out on the spreaders, whether it's a 4 needle, 6 needle, 9 needle. You want to work from the inside out. Once you get it about where you want it, you work from the inside out. Okay, so that distance there is good now. But now I have to come back and check the height. My height is still a little high. Okay, as I move it down though, it will get closer to the needle. So I'll have to make this adjustment. So you'll have to do this a couple of times. before you get it right. So I'm still a little high. So I'm going to bring that down, and then I'll have to adjust the distance again. So at this point, I tap it back down again. Okay. Then I go back to the parallel position. Needle's just about all the way down. Spread a parallel. Get this out of my way. This one got locked in. We're working with this inside needle and spreader. Okay, I brought it down so it did get just a little tighter, which is fine. Now we just got to back it off again. All right. Support it with your finger underneath. Loosen it. Back it off a little. Tighten it. And okay, that's perfect. 1/2 millimeter distance. Now I want to come back again over the top. You see the distance. Okay. It probably has to come down just a little bit, but it's close enough to where we can now set all 4 spreaders. Now we still haven't done the left to right position, but we're close enough now where I can set all 4 spreaders and then fine tune this. Okay, so needle's all the way down. 1/2 millimeter gauge, we're parallel again. I'm going to set the distance on all 4 spreaders. We already have that one. Come back, number 4, set number 4. A little too tight. Okay, now the left side. Is that too tight? Do the inside one first. Inside first. Still a little too tight. Good. Now the first needle. Okay, good. So our first setting is done. 0.5 millimeters. When the spreader is parallel to the needle, needle just about all the way down, spreader parallel. Okay, now we want to come check this. 0.1 millimeters. Well, very close. 0.1, 0.2. If it's a little higher than 0.1, it'll be fine. I like to get it usually as close as possible without touching. You want to tap on the top of your spreader and find the closest position. Probably right there. Move them in, move your loopers under slowly, right there. Right there is probably your closest position. And now that one's very close. Now we're at that 0.1. Okay, now we can come back again to see how much closer we got. But I think we'll be okay. All right, we're still okay. We didn't have to move it down that much, so our 1/2 millimeter is still good. Okay, so now we got position 1 and position 2 we're taken care of. Now we got to do our left to right position and the angle. And the angle of the spreader. It has to be angled straight. If it's twisted this way, it could be twisted that way. So we want to check the angle. Okay. All right, I'm going to put this paper behind the spreader so I can see the angle better. Best way to look at the angle is to rock. I'm going to rock this head back a little bit. I'm going to turn my hand wheel until I get a good look. You can see they're all twisted. Okay, this one, if you look at, we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, how'd that one come loose? All right, I got to go back and do that. Okay, you can see this one's twisted that way a little bit. Number 3 is twisted that way a little bit. Number 4 is also twisted that way a little bit. So let's come back and fix them. So again, you need support from your finger underneath because sometimes they will twist on you. I'm going to make sure these are a little tighter so I don't move it. Oh, that one was loose. Okay. So this one was twisted this way a little. We got to straighten it out. Finger for support. I'm putting pressure on that spreader. Loosen it. You see just loosening it. I don't know if you can see. Just loosening it, it moves. See it? Loosen, tighten, it'll twist on you. So you have to get it where you want it, and this bottom finger's got to hold it. Make sure it doesn't move when you tighten it. Okay. Now this one needed. Oh, why can't we even get tight? What happened? All right. Now this one needed to come a little bit. Alright, now I'm going to lean this back and check again. That's number 3 is still twisted too much. Number 4 is good. Number 3 is twisted too much this way. So I got to get it a little bit. Again, finger under. Turn it. Twist it a little bit with your 2 fingers. Now hold this one. You got to hold that one pretty tight or it's going to turn back on you. Alright, that should be good. And real quick, let me see why did this come loose? We had one spreader come loose on us. Let's go back and set that. Wow, did these both come loose? Maybe both. I never tightened these 2 up. All right. No big deal. All right, now let's check these left 2 spreaders. They're off just a little bit, not too bad. I'm gonna tighten this time, that's for sure. Okay, now at this point, we can do our left to right position. Okay, I'm going to check that one more time. Okay, for the most part, they're pretty level now. Number 2 could come up just a little, and number 4 could come up just a little, but they're not too bad. Let's check our left to right position. Left to right position. Again, as the looper comes under the spreader, we want to make sure this right tip of the spreader should not, well actually this line of the looper, you see this line of the looper as it comes under the spreader, should split the spreader right down the center. That's number 1. Also, this right tip here should never get inside the looper, and it should never get outside the looper. We'll discuss this as I said it, but you follow this left line of the looper as the looper comes under the spreader, it should split it right down the face. So I need my magnifying glass for this one. Okay, it's too far to the right now. You can see it. What I was talking about, the spreaders are too far to the right. As the loopers come under, you can see that right tip of the spreader is way too far to the right. It's inside the looper. You never want it inside the looper. I can give you a little look. Take a look at it again. See, it's on the inside. We're going to need to get it over that way some more. So the whole shaft, and if you look at all 4 spreaders, all of them are too far to the right. Occasionally you can get one that's off. They do, you can bend them a little bit, which we'll talk about in a second. But right now we're going to move it to the left. We're going to loosen our 2 screws that hold the shaft. Now when we tap it, when we move it to the left, it's possible we can affect our height. We'll have to go back and check the height again. Oh, okay. Probably getting close. Too tight. A little too tight. Okay, check it again. Okay, that looks good. Looks good. That one's off a little. Okay, it looks good now, left to right position. If you look closely, numbers 1, number 2, and number 4 are correct. That looper is splitting right down the face of that spreader, right down the middle. Okay, and the right corner of that spreader is not outside the looper. Number 3 is a little too far right. I don't know if you can see that with the camera, but number 3 is a little bit too far to the right. So I have 3 that are good and 1 that is not so, 1 that's off just a little bit. In this situation, you can go ahead and bend the spreader individually. They are made where you can bend them a little bit. You can bend them up and down, you can bend them left and right. Just be careful. I'm going to take a pretty heavy screwdriver, stick it right in between these 2 spreaders, and bend it a little bit to the left. Okay, that looks good now. Now they all look good. So at this point, we're finished. We're finished with your spreader timing. So basically there's 4 points you got to look at with your spreader. 4 points. 1/2 millimeter in the parallel position, needles all the way down, spreaders are parallel. 1/2 millimeter distance. When you come over the top, when the loopers are coming under the spreader, loopers coming under the spreader, as close as possible without touching, 0.1, 0.2 millimeters. And you should split the face of the spreader right down the center with the left line of your looper. Okay, and the 4th spot is the angle. Just make sure it's not twisted too much. If it's twisted slightly, you'll be all right. Okay, but just make sure they're not twisted too much. So those are your 4 spreader settings. Okay, they all look good, so I'm going to tighten that up now. And that's basically your spreader. So we did the looper and needle timing, and now we did the spreader timing. So next we have to set our feed dogs. Set our feed dog, make sure they're centered, make sure the height is correct. Okay. I'm just going to make sure these are all tight. And I'm going to double check again to make sure I like it. Now feed dog. But before we get there, let's talk about the timing of our looper take-up. Okay, this is the looper thread take-up lever. This is the pull-off. How much thread do you pull off? When do you start pulling off? When do you start coming off the thread? Okay, basically you want to set it. Your looper takeoff is moving down now, moving down. When the needles reach the top of the looper, when the needles reach the top of the looper, we call that the triangle right there. The spreader is holding the thread over. The needle is just now entering the triangle. Just as the needle reaches the top of the looper, that's when you want to start releasing your thread. So, turn it very slowly. It's coming up now. It just started to release. Just as the needles reach the top of my looper. So that timing looks good. You would adjust that from this eccentric here. This is your looper pull-off timing eccentric.
So this is the screw. No?
So that, yeah, 2 screws. You loosen the 2 screws, and you move it one way or the other until you get that right. Okay, again, you want it to start releasing the thread. As you can see, it's pulling off thread, it's pulling off looper thread, it's pulling off looper thread. You want that take-up wire to start coming up and releasing thread. Release, it's moving up right now, just as your needles reach the top of the looper, or just as they're entering the triangle, we call it. We're taking up, we're pulling off thread, we're pulling off thread, and it's starting to come up right there. Now it's starting to come up. So at that point, right when it starts releasing, that's when you want to enter the triangle. Or just as the needle reaches the top of the looper. Okay. Just wanted to point that out before we move on to the feed dog. Okay, we're going to put our feed dog in now. Here's your feed dog height pins. If you look in here on your feed dog holder, your feed rocker, you have 2 pins. They're tightened by these 2 screws here on the side. This middle screw tightens the feed dog itself. These are your height adjustment pins. Set pretty low to me, so we might have to raise them. We're going to put our feed dog in. Okay, we're going to tighten it down. Okay, they're right up against the pins. Now we have to put our throw plate back on. Put our needle plate back on. Okay, and it doesn't look too bad. At this point, we want to check the height of your feed dog. Now, a basic setting for the height of your feed dog is 1 full tooth above the throw plate. So if you look at this feed dog, you can see the depth of your tooth. These are individual teeth on the feed dog. You can see the depth of the feed dog. You want it to be 1 full tooth above the throw plate. 1 full tooth. Okay. Also, you don't want to back feed. So when the loopers, you don't want to back feed also. So when the needles, by the time the needles enter the needle plate, hole, your feed dog should drop down below the plate so it doesn't back feed. So again, we're turning our hand wheel slowly. I'm checking the feed dog. It's above the plate. It's above the plate. Now it's dropped down before the needles get near the needle plate hole. So it's a little too low. This side is actually a little higher. So the right side is a little higher than the left side. So we have to raise the left side a little bit. Right side, let's see. Right side could probably come up a little bit also. So we do have to raise the feed dog. Now, we knew the feed dog. We already did that. Feed dog is a little low. So we have to raise the feed dog. So these are your feed dog height pins here. I'm going to loosen this. I'm going to loosen that screw. See if I could lift that. You might need a magnet. Sometimes a magnet. On some machines, they're spring loaded. So when I loosen this screw, that pin would just pop up automatically because there's a spring under it. This one does not have a spring. I just pushed it up some with my screwdriver. We'll leave it there and see what happens. Okay. Now this side, I'm gonna put this side up a little bit too. Loosen the screw. Lift that pin a little bit. Okay. Now we'll put our feed dog back on again. Let's see. Alright. Then we'll check the height. Okay. Throw it back on. Still looks a little low. Still low on this side. A little high on this side, a little low on that side. Okay, so we got to raise that side up a little bit. Watch your needle. Oh. Alright, I'll try it there. Oh, it's up there now. Okay, and that will happen. As you raise one side, the other one gets a little lower. So now, okay, that's close. The right side is close. Now the left side is a little high. Okay, that's fine. Like I said, it's easier to go down. So if I lower this side a little bit, we'll probably be even on both sides. So what you do is, I'm going to loosen my height adjustment screw. I'm not going to loosen it all the way, just slightly. And you loosen your feed door, the screw that holds your feed door. You just barely snug that up. Then I'm going to bang down on my feed dog. I put my screwdriver on the back of my feed dog and I'm going to tap it. That moved the pin down a little. So like I said before, I usually go up high and then work my way down. Then you only have to take the plate off the one time if you get it right. You can overdo it and get too low again. But okay. Alright, left side's still too high. Right side's too low. I guess I didn't move it much. So we'll do it again. Too much, but alright, that looks good. Like I said, we don't want back feed. Just as the needles enter the throw plate, that's when we want our feed dog to drop down below the needle plate. So just as those needles enter the needle plate holes, that's when we want to lose our feed dog. So this side looks pretty perfect and this side is the same. So our feed dog height is set. Okay, now something else we didn't look at, feed dog again, front to back position of your feed dog. We forgot to check that. We should have checked that first. A lot of times when you change gauges, you do have to change the front to back position of your feed dog. If you look here, it's much closer to the front of the needle plate as the feed dog goes back and forth. It's much closer to the front of the needle plate. You want to check all these positions. Much closer to the front than the back. You want it equal. So closer to the front than the back. But if you had to adjust the front back position, we loosen this screw right here, and you can move your whole feed dog front to back. But yes, you're right, this is good, because it'll pick up your thread. That's not too close. It usually is a little close. It's usually a little closer to the front than the back. Yes, that's true. Okay, if you did want to center it some, you loosen this screw and you can move that whole feed dog. The entire feed rocker will move back and forth. It's a little easier. I can get at that screw probably without removing the side cover, but it's a little easier if you remove the side cover. But if you had an Allen screw with the ball on it, you would be able to get at it. If you had an Allen wrench, I mean, if you had an Allen wrench with a ball on it, you would have been able to get at it. But yes, if you loosen this, and your feed dog moves back and forth. Now when we want to set it, snug it up, turn your handle. Now we're really too close to the front. I'll loosen it, move it back a little. Okay, that's about where it was. If we made it equal distance, if I backed it up even more, yeah, that's too. But you don't want to get behind the needle plate holes. You don't want the front of your feed dogs getting even or behind your needle plate holes. They should be in front of it. And right now when it goes down, it's about even with it. So that's probably too far back, yes. Okay, so we move it forward a little. All right, that's probably good. Okay, so there's your adjustment, front to back needle position. Make sure that's not. Also, when you tighten the screw, you want to be careful here. See where you stitch. This is how you adjust your stitch length. Stitch length adjustment. Oh, I'll have to do that. Stitch length adjustment is right here. If you want a longer or shorter stitch. This is an opposite thread. You loosen this nut. It's opposite direction to loosen it. You loosen this, and then if you loosen this screw, you get a longer stitch. And if you tighten down on that screw, you get a shorter stitch. So that's your stitch length. But when you tighten this up, you see how this arm is connected here. This is all connected here. You don't want to put too much pressure one way or the other. You see how it moves? Usually moves a little easier than that. But I usually like to center it. I don't want it too tight up against the stitch regulator or too tight up against this nut. Somewhere in between. There we go, just moved again. Alright, you see it moving. Look at that. You see how it moves back and forth. You want it somewhere in the middle. So we will get it somewhere in the middle, but let's set our feed dog again and then we'll make sure that that's not too tight one way or the other. Okay, feed dog. Snug that up. A little bit more forward, maybe. All right, that's probably good. Now let's just make sure we want to set this without moving our feed dog. Oh, it moved in. Yeah. We want to set it about right there. All right. That's good. A little too far forward. Now I won't loosen this all the way. Alright, that looks good. And that looks good. Tighten it back up. Okay. Looks good, feels good. Machine is nice and free. Okay, feed dog height is set. Now we can put her back together and sew it off. We still have to put the presser foot on. Let's do the presser foot real quick. Alright. Let me put the screws back on the adapter plate. There's one screw. I don't see the other one. There it is. Let me just make sure I tighten this. Pretty sure I tightened the feed dog, but let's just make sure. Let's just make sure I tighten these screws up. All right. Okay, now when you put the feed dog on, here's your the presser foot. We're going to put the presser foot on. Here's your presser bar. That puts tension. Here's the spring and the screw that puts tension on your presser foot. Now when you put it on, you pull it down before you put your presser foot on. Then you lift the presser bar by the foot lift lever back here. Foot lift and pull the lever. See how that lifts up? Okay. And you lift it up and you put your foot on. If the bar does not fit, if the foot doesn't fit under the bar by pressing this lever, okay, you might have to adjust it here. You might have to unscrew it, take the spring out, and reset this block right here, this clamp. There's this clamp that tightens your presser bar. You would have to loosen that up and reset it. Want me to show them?
Yeah, let's show. Yeah.
We'll show it. I'll show you what I mean. Sometimes, again, when you change a gauge, occasionally the presser foot won't go under. Just by lifting it from the lever, the presser foot will not go under that shaft. So, what you have to do sometimes, I'm going to show you when it's too low, and then I'll show you how to fix it. All right, if that was too low, all right, then when I lifted it, see, I could not get my presser foot under. This will happen sometimes when you change gauges or when you switch presser feet. You can go, if you put a compensating foot on, which is a split foot in the middle, if you put a compensating foot, it will need to be in a different position probably. So you will have to adjust that sometimes. Now to set it the right way, now we'll go ahead and show you how to set it correctly. Okay, we want to loosen the screw that holds our presser bar. Okay, then put your presser foot. Put it into your presser bar, into your presser foot, presser bar into your presser foot. Now it's best to do it, put your needles all the way down. So your feed dog is below the throw plate now. Presser foot is right up against your throw plate. You want to hold that down. At the same time, this is what lifts your presser foot. This lever here. And you want this clamp, this screw, you want a little space. If you can see from this side, you don't want to pin it right up against that lever. There should be a little gap there. So I push down on my bar, then I need a little space on this lever and that screw there. A little space, and that's where I want to tighten it. Okay. So that's good. So when I push down on this, and when I lift my foot lift lever, as long as it's not touching, there's a little space there, that's good. There's a little gap between the screw and the bottom of that lever. The slot in that lever, the bottom of it, you need a little gap there. Okay, that's good. We tighten it back up. Put your spring. Your tension screw. Okay, lift your needles back up. Now, when I push down on it, it should slide out. And slide on there. And that's it. That's how you set your pressure bar shaft. Okay, and now make sure your needles are centered in the holes. All 4 needles are centered in the holes of the presser foot. And we come back in here and tighten the presser foot to the presser bar. And now we are ready to sew off the machine. Threading of the machine. Okay, looper threads. Looper threads. And these are under the looper takeoff. That's the looper thread take-up lever. The threads are under it. Okay, and then I will drop the loopers down. Okay, and then you simply push the loopers back up. They snap into place. Needle thread. And this right here is your needle thread take-up. Okay, so when I turn this over, needle thread take-up, level is the most you want to do. That will control, let me get this through. That controls the size of your loop. That controls the size of the loop that's formed by your needle thread. So, if I go lower, I'll get a smaller loop. Some thread throws a bigger loop than other threads, a larger loop from some threads than others. So, that's a little less pull off on your needle thread. And if we need more, we raise it back up. That's a little more. Most of the time the setting will be when the needle bar is all the way down. Needle bar is all the way down. The thread eyelet, it should come straight across. Straight across is the most. Very rare. You should hardly ever have to go above, more than level. If you're skipping, it's usually something other than raising that up too high. The most you want, when needle bar all the way down, level with the thread eyelet. The take-up lever and the thread eyelet level. Okay. And now we're going to put some thread on there and sew it off. Okay, we sew a few stitches, cut off your excess threads, and we're ready to go. Right now we have a paper towel under it, but we will get some fabric in a second. This, you can see it better. Okay, and there's your stitch. Beautiful stitch. It looks a little loose now, but when we put some material on there, it'll get thicker, and that stitch will look a little tighter. Okay, let me put the covers on, and then we'll put the final sample.